Episode 164 of the Stand Up Guys podcast. I'm your host, the incomparable Zach Jones, joined as always by star of the Disney Sus original program, Pokey, where he plays the villainous He Who Remains Hard as a Rock, the phenomenal A.J. Singh.
Oh man, if Disney ever found out about this.
We're getting sued. AJ, today we'll be doing a deep dive review of the season 2 premiere of Loki. And I gotta say, off the top, I really enjoyed this episode. I'm excited to get into it. But I gotta say, I kind of wish I would have rewatched season 1 before going into season 2. I mean, they do give you a little bit of a recap before this episode starts, which is helpful. But as it was going along, I'm like, oh yeah, I vaguely remember what they're talking about here, but I wish I remembered better, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I kind of felt that way too, but I was happy that they gave us the recap, and I figured they probably showed us everything we needed to really focus on with the recap, so I went with it.
Yeah, same. That's one problem about consuming so many stories, especially when it takes a year or two to get the next chapter. Is it's where did we leave off exactly? When did
season 1 come out? Has it been 2 years?
God, I was trying to think. I think it has to have been 2 years at least. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it's been a bit. Any top level thoughts before we get into details?
I just enjoyed the episode a lot, and I like that it picks up pretty much right where you expect it to.
Yeah, basically right where the last season, cliffhanged, it got right in there.
Yeah.
All right, AJ, so let's get into it. So episode 1 is entitled Ouroboros, which is, of course, the snake eating its own tail, which is pretty apt for this episode, I think.
Right, yeah.
So we open with Loki kind of, well, I guess seemingly in a new timeline, the one that was created at the end of the last season with, the king statues and everything. So we open it with Loki running from Mobius. This version of this Mobius does not recognize him. Now this could have been a short series because he just kind of blindly jumps off this ledge.
Yeah.
And, as luck would have it, he ends up landing in the back of this flying vehicle. But I mean, he took a pretty good chance there. There was a pretty good chance he would have just straight up died, right?
Exactly, right.
I mean, I guess as much as they play with time and variances, maybe he could have died and still we could have had a show. But yes, I was like, boy, Loki, I mean, I guess in fairness, he was surrounded by those guys with the time sticks that could have just killed him there. So I guess that maybe it was his only chance. But anyway, he lands in the back of this flying vehicle, and that causes that vehicle to crash into a statue of Kang. And we see kind of the face of Kang crumble a little bit, and then it crashes into the TVA office building. So he gets out. And then that truck falls down, and you hear the driver scream. And I wrote that driver is almost certainly dead.
Yeah, for sure, right?
And he even makes a little joke there where he's like, she's fine, or something like that. Man, I gotta say, this show, after the last couple Marvel shows they've had, Hawkeye, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, Secret Invasion, we weren't hot on any of those, and this show just from episode 1 is a breath of fresh air. I really enjoyed this, and I'm just happy to finally have another Marvel show that I can get excited about.
Yeah, I hope they keep up this quality with other shows. Maybe they can get the good writers back. I'm not sure.
But, God, I hope so. So Casey the janitor, who was also, played a bit part in the first season, is in this room he crashes into, and he also doesn't recognize him. Uh, and so that version of Casey goes to like turn him in, but then Loki ends up disappearing and reappearing in that same place, but in a different timeline where Casey does recognize him. Um, so when that truck crashed into the building, it left a crack on the floor, and Loki sees that same crack in the floor. So he realizes that he's just been transported a little bit into the future. Um, so he asks Casey where Mobius is, um, and I think Casey like goes to answer him, but like Mobius or Loki just like disappears again. And this is going to be something that happens a lot during this episode. He keeps like glitching in and out of like timelines.
Right.
So Mobius and B-15 are discussing about telling the people the truth about what was uncovered last season, about how the time gods were total, fakes, and that when they prune the variant timelines, like they are like killing like billions of people each time they do that, basically. And
Yeah.
also, like, I didn't remember this from season one, but completely. But as they get into it, like, I guess all the hunters, like, they were like taken from different variant timelines, so they had lives of their own. But
Yeah.
then they were like taken, and now they like serve the TVA, and
Mhm.
they weren't aware of that because like their memories were erased. Um, so Casey tells Mobius that he just saw Loki, and Mobius is like, um, tries to find him using Miss Minutes, but he's interrupted by a hunter, Hunter X5 specifically, who tells him that when Renslayer went missing, and I remember from last season, like Renslayer was Mobius's boss, and we found out that she was kind of in league, I think, with Kang or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And according to his recordings, I guess you're going down the recordings now.
Um, that is coming up. So I don't remember exactly what was revealed about her during season one, other than like she was kind of a bad guy.
In season one, it almost seemed like she wasn't sure of what her role was in that whole thing. Like she didn't. It seemed like she didn't know about Kang till the very end when she gets that dossier about that information from Kang with regards to whatever he wants her to know. And then she says that she's going to go search for free will, and I assume that is Kang. But it did seem like she was in the dark for most of the season with regards to what the TVA was.
Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
another reason I wish I would have rewatched season one, but there's just not enough time in the day sometimes. um, but yeah, Hunter X5 tells him that when Renslayer went missing, there because she went missing, there's a new judges council. So General Dox and Judge Gamble want to see him and B-15 in the war room. And B-15 is like that African American TVA
Mm-hmm.
agent. She was also played a role in the first season, and
Yeah.
she's on Mobius's side.
Yeah.
So as soon as they leave that room, Loki reappears, and Casey tells them like, "Oh, Mobius just went to the war room." So as Mobius walks to the war room, we see in the background like Loki like briefly glitches in and out again, and the lights start blinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as they almost enter the war room, another hunter exits the war room. He apologizes to Mobius for trying to prune him during the end of season one. And Mobius basically just says, "Oh, that's okay. You were just following orders, and Renslayer was really, the one to blame."
Yeah.
So Loki appears again, and outside the war room, and he goes in. But what we find out is he uh, time jumped again, and so he goes into a war room that's empty, but a war room that I think is like a little bit into the future. I want to say,
I think
um,
so.
and he sees on the wall there's like this. I don't know if you call it a statue or a series of like it's like a series of like bronze looking like faces, like of a bunch of like Kang variants.
You know, that might be the past, right? Because that gets covered up later on.
Yeah, you might be right. That maybe that's the past. I think you're right. Yeah, that must be the past,
Yeah.
given what happens later on. I think you're right. Um, so in Mobius's war room, the judge asks he and B-15 to explain themselves. Um, and then it kind of goes back and forth here. So back to Loki's war room, he plays a tape left by Kang. In the tape, Kang is thanking someone for being on his team. So Loki rewinds the tape, and we find out that Kang was talking to Renslayer. And so that's my thing is like, I don't know when exactly that conversation took place and like
Yeah.
when she ended up being on his side. Whether that would have been some point, before season one, during season one, after, I don't really know when that took
Yeah, because
place.
that contradicts like how she behaved during season one. She seemed like she didn't know about the timekeepers being fake and stuff. She maybe it was an act. Maybe it was all an act. I'm not sure. Or maybe Kang wiped her memory like he wiped other people's memories.
That
It's
could
hard
be
to
too,
say.
yeah.
Yeah.
So B-15 tells the judge how they are all variants themselves, and how they all had lives on the timeline. Basically what they were talking about before, and that how like, um, oh, so first Mobius says, look, yeah, all these new timelines are forming, but the sky isn't falling. Nothing catastrophic has happened yet. And the X5 guy points out that there was a robot head on the table. Now, is that like one of the robot heads of the fake time gods?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the general, she does want to prune the timelines, but B-15 argues, that they would be destroying lives, like killing billions and billions of people if they do that,
Hmm.
and that they were all lied to and everything. So B-15 does convince the judge to order a stop to the pruning. And then as soon as she does that, Loki appears in this war room. So this causes a commotion where like X5 comes up and he kind of, threatens Loki with his time stick.
Yeah, he's
Loki,
super aggressive for no reason, man.
yeah, that guy, he just seems like a real dick, right?
Yeah.
They really set him up as just kind of an a-hole. But Loki ends up stealing that time stick, and he goes over and he hits the wall, which reveals all those heads of Kang. So I think you're right. So he must have been in the past, and those were eventually like paved over, and now
Yeah.
he's revealing it. And so he tells them that this guy, he's who stole your lives from you, and that he'll be coming back.
Hmm.
He tells them that Sylvie killed him, he who remains. And I think the general asks, "Where is Sylvie?" And he's like, "I don't know." Um, the general tells, uh, "Okay, so this I thought was a little weird." So Loki and Mobius, they leave the room, but then the female general, she like puts her head up against like X5's, like, and tells him that the time gods were fake, but their warnings are real, and they need to find out what happened at the end of time. But like the way she like touched him, I'm like, are they like mother and son? Or, I don't think they are.
Right.
But it's like
Yeah.
it seemed different from just like a general soldier relationship. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's very intimate in a certain way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was like, do these guys got something going on? What's going on here?
But also, like Loki just told her what happened at the end of time.
Yeah, I thought that was a little weird too. Like yeah, it was fast, but he just kind of did tell you, what
Yeah.
happened. Um, but she tells X5 to find Sylvie, and that she's the reason they're in this mess. So Loki tells Mobius what happened with Sylvie and Kang and everything at the end of season one. Um, and he says that pruning the timeline was basically a plan by He Who Remains to make sure to keep the other Kang variants from forming.
Hmm.
Um, which I didn't remember that detail, but that is kind of like a cool, detail that he basically set up the whole facade of the time gods so that he would be like the only Kang, and that like
Yeah.
they wouldn't be overrun with Kangs, which is what's happening now.
Mhm.
Um, he tells Mobius that his memory has probably been wiped like many times over the years. Loki tells Mobius that he just came from a past version of the TVA, which Mobius says is impossible. He then glitches out again in front of Mobius, and like they even have like this conversation where like Mobius is or Loki's like, how did that look? And Mobius is like, oh, not that bad or what. They go for a little bit of humor here,
Yeah.
and Loki says, yeah, it doesn't feel that bad or it's fine or whatever. Um, so Mobius is like, well, we gotta like have you checked out and see what's wrong with you. And he goes to check Miss Minutes for a way to help Loki, but Loki's like, no, you can't trust her because she was there, at the end of time, and seemingly maybe works for He Who Remains.
Right.
Um, so Mobius says he's going to take him to repairs and advancements. So they go there, and we find out it's headed up by Short Round from Indiana Jones. So his name is Ouroboros, but he says he goes by OB. Um, he says he hasn't seen Mobius for 400 years. Now, I assume this is something they established in season one, but something I totally forgot about. So, like, are they within the TVA, like immortal? Do they just live forever and serve the TVA?
I think so. That's
Yeah,
the
because
impression I get.
that's the impression I got too, and like it sounded like OB had been around for like ever as well, like
Right.
Um, so Loki glitches again, which OB calls time slipping. He says he can't fix it, and that it's impossible in the TVA. But Mobius is like, you just saw it happen.
Yeah.
So of course it can't happen, and he's like, yeah, I'm having a problem like reconciling that.
Yeah.
Um, so when Loki glitched out, he went back in that same area, but to the past. So Loki meets with Ouroboros in the past, and he gives him the nickname of OB, and he's like, "Oh, I like that." So even like, you know, the snake eating its own tail, like, and time paradox, like, it's happening all over the place during this
Yeah.
sequence.
Mm.
Which I thought this was like creative. It is one of those things where you can't question it too much because, like any time paradox, you go like, "How does this happen?"
Right. Yeah.
So now present day OB remembers Loki time slipping in the past, and past OB tells Loki he would need what he calls a temporal aura extractor in order to stop him from time slipping. So he builds it in the past, and Loki tells him to keep it until Mobius visits him in the future. Um, so then it goes right back to the future, and Mobius is like, "Do you have one of those devices?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Oh wait, yeah, I do." And he pulls it out, and here it is. So he tells Mobius that he must take this device to the time loom and pull Loki directly out of the time stream. But he warns Mobius that he has to be quick about doing this, otherwise, all of his skin will be ripped off and he'll die.
Yeah.
So past OB tells Loki that he must violently rip himself from every thread of time and space, essentially pruning himself um, to be able to come back to the present and stop time slipping. Um, so now Loki jumps back to the future, um, and OB's lamp starts to flicker on and off, and he's like, something's wrong with it. And Mobius tells him like, no, the TVA has been having power surges all day. And so that OB kind of seems shocked by that news, because like he knows it's like that's something that's out of the ordinary, shouldn't be happening. So OB, they're walking down the hallway now towards the time loom, and OB says the branching timelines are overloading the temporal loom. So they open the door to the where the loom is. Well, actually, to this room that looks out into the time loom.
Right.
And he tells Loki they need to prune the extra branches to stop the loom from melting down. B-15 is there, and she says they can't do that because countless people would die. So Obi says they need to close the blast doors until he can figure out how to retrofit the loom to handle the extra branches. OB tells Loki he must cure his time slipping before the blast doors close. I thought this was kind of a weird thing. Like, we find out in not too long why he does it. But like, there's dust on one of the computers, and Mobius writes, skin ? Which I know he has this thing of like, is he going to die and like lose his skin? But at the same time, I thought it was kind of weird that he would have wrote that, on that computer monitor. I don't.
Yeah, it was kind of strange. Yeah, I wasn't sure what his purpose was with that. Maybe it was a message to Loki. I don't know.
I mean, at first I was like, okay, is this going to be a thing where like something goes wrong and eventually like he comes back to this spot and like that's a message from his past self and teaches him to do something? But no, in a minute it ends up being something that tells Loki he's in the future. But like, I mean, I don't think Mobius could have possibly planned on that, So I guess he was just like messing around, and it ended up being a storytelling device,
Mm-hmm.
So OB gives Loki a timer, and he says when the timer turns green, Loki must prune himself with his time stick, or he will become lost to time, and Mobius will lose his skin and die. So at that moment, a hunter shows up and says that General Dox is putting together a squad to go after Sylvie. Loki wants to go and help Sylvie, but Mobius is like, no, you can't go now. Like, it's now or never. We gotta do this, because I think like even before that, like there was a small rift in the time loom or whatever, and OB was like, we got like 5 minutes to do this,
Right. Yeah.
So he can't go, but B-15 is like, I'll go and see what's up, instead. So Loki, at that moment, time slips, and unfortunately, like his time stick drops, so he loses it, and that's what he would use to prune himself, And so, yeah, Loki time slips, and because he sees Mobius's like, message in the dust, he puts it together that, oh, I'm in the future.
Right.
So OB puts Mobius in kind of this bulky radiation suit, and he tells him that he's basically got to go outside, plant the device, and then hurry back before the suit degrades and his skin is exposed and he dies.
Mm-hmm.
So Mobius, he goes out there, he plants the device, and now while he's doing that, Loki is scrambling in the future to find a new time stick, because without the time stick he can't prune himself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this ticking clock. Now I will say I do think this timer is like really convenient, and that OB is kind of like, I feel like he's going to play this part of always having like convenient things for them to use, but I mean, it's entertaining, so I'm okay with it, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, the timer does turn green before Loki can find a time stick, and at the same time, he starts to hear a phone ringing. So OB tells Mobius that they only have 30 seconds left. Uh, and so OB hits a button which starts to slowly close the blast doors. So Mobius sees that and tries to make it back. But again, the suit is very bulky, so he's going like slow, and
Right.
it kind of looks like he's not going to make it. So that ringing telephone is next to an elevator that Sylvie ends up coming out of. And as soon as she sees Loki, Loki like starts to disappear, and he looks like he's in pain. So like, we're like, okay, is he being lost to time or whatever? But as we go back to the present, like I said, it looks like Mobius is about to get stuck and die. But at that very moment, Loki is gets slingshotted out of the time loom and bumps into Mobius, and both of them are knocked inside before the blast doors close, so they're safe.
Yeah. So I
Uh,
mean, I thought he maybe got pruned or something. Like somebody must have pruned him from behind Loki. Otherwise, I don't know how that would have worked.
well, I am wondering because I think we're gonna find out too that maybe either another time version of himself or somebody made that telephone ring so that he would go there. And so you
Right.
might be right. I think we're going to find out something like that. Like he distracted himself to that phone and then, yeah, maybe came up behind him with a time stick. Because otherwise, it seems like he was pruned without a time stick and they've never, set up how that could happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be something like that.
I can see that. I think. Yeah, I think you're right. I think he pruned himself, and then he met up with Sylvie, and they did whatever to get out of there. I'm not sure though. Let's see.
That actually would make sense. Like we'll see that like as soon as he disappears, the Loki that pruned him is going to be like, "Oh, hi, Sylvie," something like that, and then they'll have a discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
But then, like, I do wonder, like, if it was himself that rang the telephone, is there like some weird Back to the Future type rule where he can't see another time version of himself or something? Um, so now we see that the general and like her men and like a lot of men are going through a time door, and B-15 is watching them go through, kind of puzzled, because basically she thinks like they have to be doing more than just going after Sylvie, like with this many men, So
Right.
there's kind of a mystery going into episode 2, and that's where the episode ends and goes to credits. But AJ, it doesn't quite end because, like a lot of Marvel things, there is an after credit stinger. Did you watch that as well?
Oh no, I didn't see that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there is a stinger. So in the stinger, Sylvie shows up in Broxton, Oklahoma, which oddly enough, in the comic books, is where like New Asgard is built. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
might be wrong about this, but I believe in the first Thor movie, like that's where his hammer originally gets like thrown, and like all the rednecks are trying to like pick it up and stuff.
Oh, okay.
I think that's where that was. I might be wrong about that. It's been forever since I watched that, but I think it
Right.
was.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
anyway, she goes into a McDonald's, a little product placement by McDonald's, and the
Mhm.
guy's like asked her what she wants, and she kind of looks around the McDonald's and she sees all these. She looks longingly at like all these like couples that are there,
Mhm.
um, in love and stuff, and she says to the guy, "I want to try everything." So
Mhm.
like it, it's a little like I think they're definitely I like setting up like what I like about this show is like they can visit like a lot of different time periods and do a lot of like timey wimey stuff.
Yeah.
What I do appreciate about this episode is it's like it's very kind of densely constructed with the different time periods, the different variants. That whole thing they did with Obi in the past and the future,
Yeah,
and I just like to see that much thought put into one of these shows. Where some of them, the writing seemed really undercooked, and at least in this first episode and in season one, this show just seems a lot more thought and care was put into it in the writing.
yeah. I feel like every character serves as their purpose. I don't think there's any meaningless, pointless characters in this show. I feel like everybody's really fun to watch.
I think this show really shows you that, and I've always thought this with movie and TV projects is like the writing really is the most important thing that leads to
All right.
quality. Yes, there are directors that are better than other directors. Yes,
Mhm.
there's actors that are better than other actors. But most of these shows, if you look at the directing and the acting, for the most part, that part of things is competent, right? The things
Yeah.
that make these other shows we didn't not like, is the writing
Right.
more than anything, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the pacing. The pacing in some of these Marvel shows has been terrible. How
Right.
many how many
Yeah.
of these Marvel shows have we got to like the second to last episode and it was going nowhere and we're
Secret
like,
Invasions. It didn't give itself a chance, man. Not with that pacing.
and I remember Miss Marvel was really bad about that too.
Right.
And then it
Yeah.
gets to the last episode and you're like, oh, they did not satisfactorily wrap this up. Like,
Yeah. That was the ending to that whole conflict was just so blah.
yeah, it's just now we'll talk up this series a lot and find out that it craps a bed in the end. But I gotta say, no, I'm just like I said, this first episode really for me was a breath of fresh air, especially in the writing department.
Yeah.
And other Marvel shows, please take note because you know writing is king, and so I am glad the writers' strike is over. I'm glad they're getting more benefits because, like,
Yeah.
man, the writing needs to be appreciated more than it is.
It's the heart and soul of the shows, man. Like of all this content.
I do feel like just over the years, like, you know, maybe its casting has gotten better, or there's just a larger pool of actors. But like, I feel like when we were kids, there was, a lot of shows where like you could say like, boy, there's some really bad acting going on
Yeah.
here. And like, of course, in modern day, you still get
Yeah.
bad acting. I just feel like more so when a show or a movie doesn't work for me, it's almost always the writing. It's for
Yeah.
me anyway. It's rarely the acting. It's rarely the direction. It's almost always the writing.
Exactly. Agreed.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, you can see the difference, like WandaVision in this show compared to like Secret Invasion and I guess Miss Marvel. Like, there's a huge gulf there. Like some shows make you question what's going on, and like they're so clever that you're like, oh, it could be a million different things going on here, and I'm so curious to find out which one it is. And then some shows, it's like they've really backed themselves into a corner. Are they going to be able to do something with this? Like you can kind of see it coming.
yeah, or you don't see it coming, and once you get it, you're like, oh, they
Yeah.
made the Kingpin look like an idiot,
Right.
or so much less interesting, or
Yeah.
like,
That's something you don't want to see coming.
right. It's like I didn't see it coming, but once I got it, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Man, God, that last episode of Hawkeye still pisses me off. I hated that. I hated it. I don't even know if they
I
can
heard.
redeem that. It was so bad.
Yeah. Are they still making Echo? Because I'm not interested in that at all.
I think they did make it. I think it's in the can because I remember,
Okay.
I don't know if they'll stick to this. And since we're doing this show, maybe I hope they don't. But like at one time, they were going to say they were going to release it all at once rather than week to
Right.
week. And I want to say originally they said they were going to do it in like November-ish. But now
Hmm.
with the strike and everything being moved, who knows? It's really hard to say. I don't think they put a date
Right.
on it or anything. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a show, God, that I'm not interested in either. Um, I
No.
mean, look, fingers crossed. It could always be good, but I just remember seeing that character in Hawkeye and being so shocked that they like greenlit her own series
Right.
because I'm like, in that show at least, she didn't come off as interesting in the least, and I was
Hmm.
just like, wow, they're making a show with her. Okay, that seems odd.
I mean, if they make that show, it has to be surprisingly good writing. Like it has to be something that like is above and beyond our expectations by far for us to enjoy it. Because I mean, there's nothing there right now.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to assume, given what happened at the end of Hawkeye, that show is going to have Kingpin in it. And you would also
Yeah.
have to assume that eventually Kingpin will be involved in the Daredevil show. So, I mean, if for nothing else, I want to watch it for that lead in because I still am very interested in Daredevil.
Yeah.
But boy, um, but yeah, man, as far as Loki season one was by far my favorite season of these Marvel shows. And
Hmm.
judging by this episode, I'm happy that the quality is still there. I'm very happy.
Yeah. I'm very optimistic about this show. I don't feel like there's been any drop off, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this season progress.
And what I like is I think this show and I like this is even harder to predict than
Yeah.
a lot of the other shows. Like I really don't have a good guess as to where things are going. Again, it's just one episode in, but like my only guesses for so far are that like we said, like we're gonna find out that like he made the telephone ring and like he probably stabbed himself in the back with a time stick or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Other than that though, man, I don't have any real guesses.
How many episodes do we have this season?
That's a good question. I don't know if they've announced that yet or not.
Okay.
I'm guessing like most of these have been either 6 or 8 episodes, so I'm guessing it's something like that.
I hope it's on the
Um,
high end. I hope it's at
yeah, I
least
kind of
8.
do too. I kind of do too.
Yeah.
Um, but AJ, what do you think before we wrap things up here? What would you give this score wise out of 10?
I'd give it like a solid 8 at least out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going high too. I didn't bump up against much in this episode. I think I'm going to go like I'll go with 9 out of 10. I was happy with this.
Nice.
I thought it was
Yeah.
really well written. All the acting was good. Yeah, as far as the cast, man, Tom Hiddleston was great. Owen Wilson's great.
Hmm.
Um, I forget how to pronounce Short Round's name, so my
Oh,
apologies
Ke
to
Huy
that
Quan.
actor. Yes,
I
yes,
think that's
yes.
his name. Okay.
And I thought he was really great too. I thought he was entertaining.
Yeah, he's fun to
So yeah,
watch.
I like this cast, and I'm raring to see where it goes.
Yeah.
All right, AJ. Anything else before we wrap up?
Man, that's it.
All right, guys. Well, comment down below. Tell us what you thought of Loki. Tell us any predictions you may have for future episodes and where the season will take us. But yeah, please, if you will, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Uh, uh, Leave us thumbs up, positive reviews. Also, subscribe in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. Follow me on Twitter/X at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. And that is going to do it for all of our shenanigans and poppycock this week. Please, please, please tune in again next week. Bye, guys.
Take care.